Okay, I hyped it up at the start of the show. It's my special guest, the one and only Jeff Cannonball. Jeff, I'm so happy to see you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And as I've apologized to you already, I will apologize to anyone else. I'm not drunk. This is voice now. Um, if I can make it through without crying, I think we got to win, though.
I think so, but even if we cry, that's okay, man, because I don't know. I mean, I know you've been going through a lot, and I've been doing a lot of therapy, mental therapy over the last few months because I've been going through shit myself. And, I find that not that I'm not a crier, I've always been an open guy, but I just feel like lately, for the first time, I'm crying about stuff that I never cried about. And it's quite the healing process, that's for sure.
Yeah, I actually started therapy right before my diagnosis, but we knew where it was going. I had the idea. And yeah, I will fully agree. I think therapy has been incredible for me. It's really got me by in my day to day. But I've always been a crier. Most people can tell you that, and this situation doesn't help that. But therapy really has been awesome.
Yeah. What do you think that you've learned from therapy thus far? Because one of the most important things, and sort of the reason why I went to therapy, is I thought I had taken care of a lot of childhood trauma because with my wrestling character, the character is not too far off from who I am as the person, right? But being an open person and talking about the things I went through as a kid, I thought like that was my way of dealing with it. But it turns out that as an adult, um, for example, my parents were very abusive to one another and they were always like punching and beating each other's asses. And so in my own personal relationships, because I wasn't yelling at my girlfriend or hitting her or things like that. I thought like when we got into little spats, there wasn't much of an issue. But I had a skewed perception of what a healthy relationship could be and what an issue could be. So, like for you, what made you go to therapy and what have you learned from it?
So before we knew what was going on, but ALS was thrown around. They had me going to physical therapy, just be safe and do what I can. Um, after once we got closer to the real diagnosis, I was a mess. And I remember one day at physical therapy, I broke down, trying real hard in front of this very nice, but poor woman that I was just making awkward. Probably, and she eventually goes, "Are you in therapy?" I said, "No," and she goes, "You realize you should be, right?" And she nailed it. Realistically, I probably should have been in years ago. Um, as man, I'm gonna cry already. As some know, my dad died the day before my son was born. Um, I, I probably should have been in therapy the next day, but I didn't. Um,
Yeah.
I've learned to give myself more credit, and not just beat myself down. Um, like it sucks having to learn all these adaptations, and I definitely beat myself down for I know it's not proper, but not feeling normal. Um, so that got me, and I learned to really give myself credit for being able to adapt to new things, whether it's you know getting up, like standing above the couch, or even ways to get downstairs, ways to drive, shower. Um, I've had to switch up the way I've done all of these things for 37 years. So I'm not beating myself up over what I can do, but really giving myself credit for kind of rolling with it and doing what I can.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. Well, we're going to jump around a little bit here, I guess. You know, when I watched you get inducted into the GCW Deathmatch Hall of Fame, incredibly emotional for me to watch at home. I went out of my way to watch it just because I knew you were getting inducted and I needed to watch it. And when you're there for the induction, you were in a wheelchair. You've been losing some of your mobility in certain areas. But then I saw the clips from No Holds Barred, and you walked to the ring, and I was like, holy fuck. So like, what is the change? Like, so like, I guess to catch everyone up to speed, what exactly are you going for? And what was the change from the Hall of Fame to No Holds Barred just a few weeks ago?
So I can still walk and stand for like shorter periods of time, but that GCW, when we got there, first off, it was a 2.5 hour drive, and then getting there, walking to the hotel. It's a very big hotel. Excuse me. And by the end of the day, or by the time I was in front of the crowd, I was and so I did the chair to be safe. If I do fall down or anything, I cannot get back up. I got to get help. Um, and as you know, I'm a big boy, so it takes a few people. But at ICW, that's only 20 minutes from my house, so it was an easy drive. My sister drove. I just had to sit there, and I didn't walk around pretty much that whole show. I stayed in a chair in the back. If you watch, I walk out, immediately grab a chair just to kind of be safe. I don't go around the ring, and then once the match starts, I walked right to the back again and sat down again. I can walk a little bit. I'm nervous in crowded places because my balance absolutely sucks. And it just gets worse. But yeah, at ICW, I was a little more rested, so I didn't feel as scared about walking around. Which is why at the Hall of Fame, when I did my speech, I stood up and walked, I don't know, 10 feet to the little podium and then did my thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's limited.
For those that don't know, you're battling Lou Gehrig disease, and you know, uh, essentially, you made the announcement a few months back, but it was something you were figuring out all the way back to last year. So, talk me through that process of how exactly you came to realize that something wasn't right.
So I'm bad at dates, but from what I remember, it was April of last year. I was changing my at the time newborn's diapers, and my left hand would like freeze up and like cramp up. Excuse me. It would like cramp up like real weird, and I wouldn't be able to move unless I literally moved it with my other hand. And at first, I didn't think anything of it. I thought, like, oh, I'm not used to changing a diaper. I'm cramping up from these new weird movements. Um, but as time went on, it got weaker. It got just different. And as with, I think, a lot of wrestlers who make poor decisions, I didn't get checked out for months. It wasn't until I was going to the doctor for something completely unrelated. And while I was there, I went, hey, by the way, and just told him what was going on with my hand. He thought I had arthritis, so I got checked. No arthritis. And I never really followed up too much because, again, like I got a new baby and just being kind of dumb, I figured it'll get better, whatever. It wasn't until my left arm, I couldn't raise it anymore. Past maybe 45 degrees. Is that, yeah, 45 degrees. And then my right hand would cramp up like my left hand used to. So I went to another doctor. She had me get an MRI. I went back to her. She goes, all right, it might be your spine. Let's go to a spine doctor. I did that, and he goes, oh, it's carpal tunnel. Which even at the time, I went, there's no fucking way. It's affecting my arm, not just my hand. So I was kind of just going forward with that. That's what started me out. physical therapy. And within like a minute, the physical therapist goes, "Hey, like, I don't know what you have, but this isn't carpal tunnel. You gotta get a second opinion." So I went to another spine doctor, and he was the one that goes, "Hey, like, your MRI is not bad." He goes, "I don't think this is gonna be a fine thing." He goes, "Oh, he was actually the first one." He goes, "Unfortunately, like, a lot of what you're saying might be ALS." So I got kicked around to a neurologist. And as I learned with neurology, everything is booked up way, way, way in advance. Um, I went to, I think, I made appointments with 3 different neurologists. They were all like 6+ months in advance. So I remember with one, I flat out said, like, "Hey, they think I have ALS. Can I be on a waiting list?" And they eventually bumped me up. And yeah, they signed me up for all these tests because I am well under the age of what ALS or Lou Gehr's usually affects. Usually it's for alcohol. Um, so we did, 20 some vials of blood, a whole bunch of tests. And eventually that doctor who signed me up for all the tests was the one to go, "Unfortunately, it is that." And well, after all that rambling, I apologize. They got me into a ALS clinic, and that's what I do now.
Um, since your diagnosis, like, is there any type of like medication or anything that you can take, or like, what does that look like?
So there's 2 different medications that are approved, and I'm on both of them. What they basically are is they're just there to slow the progress. So, like with ALS, there is no cure, nothing like that. The best they could do right now is to try to slow everything down and get you by as best as possible. Um, so that's what I'm doing. And the other unfortunate thing is there's really no mapping out the progress. There's guys like Stephen Hawking who lived, I think, something like 50 years from the diagnosis, and then there's you know, uh, Steve McMichael, who did 4 years. Like, you really don't know. So it really is kind of just adapting as you go.
Um, it's emotional to hear that, right? Because I've known you for a long time now, and in knowing and seeing a lot of your matches over the years, I don't know, in knowing that we were going to talk today, obviously I knew that we were going to talk about what you're going through now, but I kind of want to talk about, the thing that bonds us together more than anything, and that's pro wrestling, right? And it was interesting in going back and figuring out your story, how similar are similarly we discover wrestling and our favorites. Like, you grew up as a big Ultimate Warrior guy, and you get into wrestling because of your dad.
Yeah. He was a fan, all his life. Like, he told me stories of Bruno and all that. But yeah, right away I was enamored with Ultimate Warrior from, I don't know, like 4 years old, 3 years old. Like, I'm still, he's the reason I got into wrestling. Period.
Yeah. So here's the thing. So I was a Hogan guy, okay, and with the recent passing of Hulk Hogan, as an adult man, and I think a lot of people have had this feeling about Hulk Hogan. It's a complicated situation, right? And looking back at the legacy of Ultimate Warrior, in some ways it's more of the same. It was just less recent than Hulk Hogan stuff, right? Um, did you ever have a problem with like the art and the artist when it comes to that? Because when Hogan died, I had to like write out a whole thing about it. I waited a week and I was like, how do I say that I love this character as a kid, but not support what the man did, and also at the same time like realize that people make mistakes, right?
So I think my thing with Warrior, I actually remember when he died, I was dating someone else who no interest in wrestling, which is fair, smart. And I remember when it got out, I was genuinely sad when he died, Ultimate Warrior. and I guess she had seen some online about people talking about his politics and not being the best of dudes. And so she asked me about it because I've always been pretty politically minded. And my answer to her was that I grew up with the Ultimate Warrior and I always loved that character, but Jim Hellwig is a different story. And I was never a Hogan guy, and my wife didn't love that I didn't love all the good riddance when he died, because in my mind it really was like Hogan did a lot for this thing I love. Harry is a different person in my mind. Like, I'm not a superhero movie guy at all, so I'm not going to be able to think of a good example. But like, if a guy who played Superman did something, I'm not going to go, "Oh, screw Superman." It's different, and I understand why not everybody feels the same. But like you said, like I grew up with the Ultimate Warrior and Hogan and all that. It means something to my childhood and me when they go.
Yeah, some of my buddies, particularly ones in the business, which you would think they would be better about it. Like I remember getting made fun of at one point as an adult man, where like I would pay tribute to these guys that like I'm just like Instagram stories and shit, like like on the anniversary of like Owen's death or Eddie Guerrero's death and stuff like that. Like I would post something just because, like, for me, my family life wasn't always the best. And so to have these guys come into my home, every week and sometimes daily with videotapes and DVDs, they played an important role in my life, and sometimes a bigger role than my immediate family, right?
Sure. Honestly, I always had a good relationship with my family, but it still really was like, when Owen died, I was what year did he die? I feel like you're better with that than I am.
Oh gosh, I wish I knew the exact time frame. I think it might have been May 23rd, 1999. I'm a big nerd.
So yeah, I knew you'd be better at that than I am. I was, you said 99. I was 12. I cried like a baby, because it really is like I grew up watching him, whether it was the Nugget or the early days. I grew up with him, so it sucks. It's like when any celebrity dies that you were not only like enamored by, but really they shaped the way that you and I, did everything. We wouldn't be wrestling if it weren't for Owen Hogan, all these guys, and I think that's true of a lot of people. And they, I'm rambling here again, and you could cut me off whenever. But I feel like in wrestling, you're supposed to hide your fandom, and I think guys like us don't really do that as much. And I wish more wouldn't hide it, because I don't, I feel like some people take advantage of all this cool stuff they got to do. Like I wrestled Hacksaw Jim Duggan twice. I'm not gonna be like, oh, whatever, it's another day at work. I wrestled the guy that I had bed with him on it when I was a kid. Like that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, you know what? One guy that you wrestled that I wanted to bring up, because he was on my I never want to wrestle list, New Jack. What was that experience like? Because I shared many of locker rooms with New Jack, and we had no issues. But I always thought to myself, if I ever show up and my name is next to his on the card, I'm either immediately talking to the promoter or I'm driving back home.
Right. So Tremont pitched that to me, and when it came to ECW, my two favorites, New Jack and Tommy Dreamer. I was so excited, definitely nervous, and plenty of people, both like outside of wrestling and were like, "Are you sure about this?" And I was so excited. Um, I I was on my best behavior there. All yes sir, no sir, which I'm kind of like that anyway, but I definitely minded everything. And at one point, I go up to him I go, hey, do you mind if I get some color? And he goes, you want me to bleed? And I thought he thought that I was telling him, like, hey, you're bleeding tonight for me. And I panicked. I started stuttering over myself. And this is when I talk normal. And I was, no, 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 like, me. Like, do you mind if I do it? He goes, yeah, I don't care. He goes, you want me to? I was like, sir, that is up to you. And we both got color. I was pouring, but he was easy, honestly. Like, I don't want to give away too much and ruin the illusion, but he was super easy. But it's one of those things where I think I knew if I messed something up, I was done for. I would have done it again though. I had a blast.
Well, you mentioned Tommy Dreamer. You got to wrestle Tommy as well.
He was technically the first big name I ever wrestled. We tagged. And again, like I was way too new for that experience. I should not have been there, but he was awesome throughout the whole thing. And you know how it is. Like, you wrestle some of these big names, and then you see them again, they do not remember you at all. And he was one where months later, I went up to him and said hi, walked away. I figured that was it. And he came up to me, like, a half hour later or so. I was like, hey, we can work once, and now you don't want to talk to me? And so I dapped him on. You talk about guys who got a little bit of heat, but he made a dumb joke, but he was always so cool. He would talk to anybody for hours, jokes, advice, all that. Uh, I really wanted to wrestle him again because he was my first name I worked, and I wanted to be like, hey, I got a little better in these 14 years, but unfortunately, it never happened.
Yeah, Tommy's always been a great guy. We've had him on the podcast before. I've got to work with him before. Similarly, your first big name was Tommy. My first big name was Tracy Smothers. And as a kid that loved ECW and occasionally watched Smoky Mountain because we got it on one of the shitty channels here in Cleveland and stuff, I was like so nervous working with Tracy. And same with like Tommy. Tracy always remembered me after that match, even though I was a kid who had only been working 6 months and had no reason to be in the ring with Tracy Smothers. And I'll never forget like how kind and I wish I would have got a do-over with Tracy. I never got it. But
Right.
You were also a kid that loved ECW, and just like my dad, your dad thought ECW was real.
Oh yeah.
Like, where does that come from? Like, when I figured out, like, when my dad pitched ECW and said it was real, and I started watching it, I was like, I mean, it's different than the WWF, and I had seen some of the guys on Raw, but I was like, it's not real.
And that's why you know that. I have to listen to some bad podcasts to find that out. But yeah, I remember him being like, "Oh, you gotta see what these guys are doing." I'm like, who I am. Um, he thought, I guess 'cause you never see stuff like that. That was all 100% real. And I was young, so I definitely did it at first too, which I don't know what that says about my mindset that I thought was real. And what I'd love to do this stuff, especially like the barbed wire, the glass, and all that. But yeah, he thought somebody's gonna get killed on here, but he every week he would still tape it so I could watch it the next day.
Talk to me about being drawn to that type of wrestling and wanting to do it because, to be a wrestler in general, you got to have kind of a screw loose. And I don't know where my desire stems from exactly. I think I think it's layered, right? It's not like black and white. It's like, well, this happened and I wanted to become a wrestler and do these certain things. Like, I think there's more to it than that. For you to immediately to be drawn to ECW and eventually go on to become a very prominent deathmatch wrestler, where does that desire come from? How do you look at deathmatch wrestling?
So I do have a theory on this. Yeah, obviously there's the screw loose or two up there, but I so very much with the Ultimate Warrior, and I've always made this comparison that makes me sound nuts. Um, when I was a little kid seeing the Warrior, it was wrestling turned up to 100, as the cliche goes, from the loud music, the running, the screaming promos, and everything. It was just so much more intense. And just like I am with music, where I fell in love with punk and hardcore music at an early age, it's just music dialed up. It's so much more intense. So when I found IWA King of the Death from Japan with Foley and Funk via ECW or whatever it was, it was just more turning the knob up, more intense wrestling, and I loved it right off the bat. And I'd already wanted to be a wrestler since the first time I was ever asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And then seeing that, I was like, "Oh, now I want to do that too." Um, I feel you and I are talked about this in private. I love all wrestling. Um, I watch so much world of sport wrestling. That's a hard one for this new tongue. That I don't think people would believe me. I've had conversations with Jonathan Gresham and Tony Deppen about the lesser known world of sport guys. I love it all. But unfortunately, that was never going to be me. I love deathmatch from middle school. It's where I first remember buying tapes off eBay to see, Big Japan and whatever. I fell in love with it, and to me, when done right, it's just another form of wrestling. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, and obviously, when it's done wrong, it's kind of a joke. But we've all seen luchadors and technical wrestling go wrong, and that's silly too. It just doesn't. It's not as ugly and not as easy to put online with a fancy tagline about some idiot stabbing themselves in the arm with a box cutter.
Right. Well, so real quick, I just total sidebar since you brought up World of Sport. I used to watch a lot on YouTube as well, and it's a style that I like very much so. And I could never do it as a wrestler. And with a guy with one arm, it doesn't really make much sense. But one of the coolest memories that I have of being on a show, one time I did a weekend of Chikara shows, and they had Johnny Kidd and Johnny Saint. And they did, I got to watch it live, Johnny Kidd and Johnny Saint. And it was like, 15 or 20 minutes, and it was magical, man. And it just like watching the same guys on the show in Chikara, which the Chikara roster was great back at that time. I think it was like 2011 or something like that. But it's like the Chikara guys doing chain wrestling, and then watching Johnny Saint and Johnny Kidd doing it. It was on another level, right? But to transition, again, seeing you as a deathmatch performer, most people wouldn't realize how multifaceted you are, what a student of a game you are for pro wrestling in general. And you talked about, deathmatch being done right. When you think about current deathmatch wrestling and some of the tropes that you dislike and the reasons why perhaps deathmatch wrestling can get a bad name, what do you see that you're like, why are these guys doing this? Or I wish there was less of that.
That's easy. Bear Bronson right now, he's killing it, whether it's deathmatch or not. I've known him forever, but I gave him shit about this. Every single match now in deathmatch, there's a moment where somebody takes a gusset plate and just punches into somebody's head. And I think that is so overdone and so boring. Like, there's so many ways to start bleeding that everybody just went to this one. It's easy and you get a lot of blood, but as a fan of wrestling, watching it is so boring to me. It's very much the older cliche of older death matches where you just walk around and stab. That's all it really is. But instead, you're just punching into somebody's head or arm, which I'll admit, I was guilty of a small amount of times. But now I feel like you can't watch, most deathmatch shows without seeing that almost every single match. And then, of course, there's plenty of guys who I know feel the same way, who are much more notable names than I. And I know they've been outspoken. So, fingers crossed, I think. I hope we see less of that. And I only brought up Bear Compton because he's doing phenomenal, but he's been doing that. So I in person gave him shit about it, joking around, but he knew I was serious. So I don't feel bad using him as my example because he knows I love him.
You talked about the Ultimate Warrior and characters like that, being turn the dial up, and you talked about the relation between that and your love for punk rock music. You're a straight edge kid. Now, I call myself straight edge because I don't drink and don't smoke, and I discovered that through M-Dog 20, Matt Cross. I discovered it through Josh Prohibition. I discovered it through CM Punk, right? Through pro wrestling, and it made me feel not as weird being a kid that didn't want to drink or smoke because my parents sucked, right? And I say straight edge without being a guy who really listens to Minor Threat or any of that stuff. For you, how do you discover straight edge punk rock music, and what does that mean to your life?
So I will start by saying after my diagnosis, I started taking edibles once in a while at night. So I unfortunately no longer consider myself straight edge. If I weren't terminal, I would still be straight edge. But it helped me sleep. I only do it at night. I feel good for a little bit, and I sleep better than I would have. Nighttime is where your mind goes to all the worst places, and I was doing that, and so I gave in. I tried it edible, and I got sleep again. But from the time I first claimed straight edge when I was 13 years old, and I lasted up until I got sick. But I discovered it through, I went to a show without really knowing what punk music even really was, minus like the bigger, poppier bands like the Green Days and stuff like that. Um, so I was big into skateboarding as a kid too. And I remember there was a flyer for a punk show. Wow, I'd like to see what that's about. It was a skate shop. And so I went and I found love immediately. And the singer of the second band, the singer had X's on his hands. And I'm a 13-year-old. I'm just going around talking to whoever will talk to me, being a weird little kid. I go, hey, what's that, man? He told me. I was like, huh. Because much like you said, I had already been like, I don't want to drink or do that. I got all this other stuff to do. And so immediately I was like, oh, that's what I am too. And finding punk, I got into the Minor Threats, the Youth of Today's, Uniform Choice, and all these bands that made, not drinking, not smoking seem really fucking cool. And I just happen to also love their music. And I think uh, it's time that I think I know punk is what shaped almost everything about me. That's how I found out about um, you know, veganism, straight edge was still cool. A lot of politics I got heavily invested into. And just like, I think it's why, and I'm not trying to give myself all the credit in the world, but like, why I think I've been able to kind of adapt to with wrestling and in real life, where I just treat people with the respect that you kind of learn through the unity of the punk scene. And I feel like that's unfortunately missing from a lot of stuff, including wrestling. And that's why when, I got sick, so many people came in the woodwork because I kind of had these values that I never really strayed from and I always stuck to because of punk. And I feel like I've kind of taken the scenic route on that, but I hope I answered what you were asking.
No, you did. And you know what? Not too long ago, I was talking to M-Dog, Matt Cross, about you. And it was funny because the last thing that Matt wants to talk about ever is pro wrestling. And when I brought you up, he referenced you as there's like one of three actual punks in pro wrestling. And he said, and Jeff Cannonball is one of them.
I mean, that's funny because I was a fan of yours before I met you. I was a huge fan of his before I met him, and we did a show together. We did a couple, but the first one I think we really talked was Limitless Wrestling in Maine. We talked about hardcore and punk for it must have been like an hour before the show. There's no wrestling whatsoever. It was a lot of hey, have you heard this? This sounds like this. You'll like this. And I would agree with his sentiment. There's not many of the, elitist mind speaking, true punks out there, but he and I are two of the good ones.
So, you were in a lot of punk rock bands before the transition into wrestling. You got your foot in the door with wrestling through doing security and selling tickets. I did the same thing. What did that look like for you? Because for me, it was like I didn't have the courage to ask to be a wrestler yet because I just, I see Zach Gowen and I start to believe that maybe I could be a wrestler, and I start telling people that doubt me that I'm going to be a wrestler. But it's not as black and white as, oh, I saw Zach Gowen and then I knew I was going to be a wrestler. I had a feeling I wanted to do it, found this school, and then I got scared and I sold some tickets. What did the transition to getting your foot in the door and then actually wrestling look like?
So, as I think happens, I kind of fell out of the idea of being a wrestler as I got older. And then when I was in college, I don't know what it was, but actually I do know what it was. It was Eddie Kingston, Chikara, and guys like Danny Havoc and Sammy Callahan in CZW, and they made me go, I want to try this again. I was in college, and in my mind, I was like, all right, I'm doing the responsible thing, but let me give this a shot and see if just see what happens for fun. So I think I actually made a post on probably MySpace at the time about looking for schools, and a buddy of mine hit me up from the punk scene. He goes, "Hey, I'm friends with this guy who does wrestling. I don't know if it's what you want to do, but maybe it's worth checking out." And I looked, and it was a guy named Corey Havoc. He wrestled for a lot of small stuff around Jersey. I think he did like a couple ROH tryouts. But he was wrestling. It's what I want to do. So my buddy put me in touch, and he said, "Hey, like, it's not the most proper of schools, but you come, you build the ring, do the chairs, do security, and we're gonna get you in the ring before the show." Um, Famously, it's the same way Joey Janela got into wrestling. He's talked about it on, every single podcast, kind of stuck in the back door. And it's kind of what I did too. But yeah, it was just showing up, setting up chairs to the ring, and then I'd get in the ring with, Corey Havoc or Eric Corvus, who used to be Corvus Spear, Mike West, whoever was there, and they would roll around, just teach you things. And then eventually I went to some more reputable schools. But yeah, I got in the back door, and I trained for a long time because I think I saw other guys they used for selling tickets, and I went, oh, they're terrible. I want to be able to do this right. And it wasn't until they had these two guys, the Nigerian Nightmares, two 500-pound dudes. They were awesome. But a lot of the ticket sellers would just go and get squashed by them. And I remember watching one with two ticket sellers who immediately pissed everyone off. And they got the shit kicked out of them. And I remember talking to Corey Havoc. I go, hey, I know that I won't piss people off. I'm going to come in with a better attitude. And I know I can have a better match than those two. Do you think I can get put in a match? So he talked to the promoter, and a couple months later, I was in a 3-on-3 with two of the guys, Corey Havoc and Eric Corvus, who really knew what I could and couldn't do. And they babied me through a match after I sold 37 tickets.
Love that. Love that. So like you're finally in the ring, you're doing the thing. Eventually, you start coming to prominence in deathmatch wrestling. When you look back at your deathmatch wrestling experiences, what are the career highlights for you?
Like past years getting into it, you mean?
Just in general, like once you got into it, like what are the death matches that you look back at fondly? Like that's something I look back on and I'm proud of.
So at my first TOD, when when it was still at its peak, I'll say, it was TOD 15. tournament of death, for people who don't know. And I will be honest with you, I cried in the back of a ring truck. I went and hid in a ring truck and just cried because in my mind, that was, I made it. That's what I wanted to do. Going to CZW, I went to CZW every month for years as a fan. Probably even after I started wrestling for a little bit, I was probably still second row in a lot of those shows. Or, same thing with I was in the crowd at a bunch of Takara. I saw you wrestle at High Noon before I ever met you. But to sit in the crowd to wrestle at Tournament of Death against Matt Fremont, who is fucking Matt Fremont, and he was already who he is. Unbelievable. If that was the last thing I ever did, it would have been fine. But then I got to do IWA Big South King of the Death, which I owned all those DVDs, probably a couple of VHS tapes. And I'll be honest, all my accomplishments are things that I was a fan of that I ended up doing. Even stuff like getting to work and get pictures taken by Lyle, who he was the camera guy for every CW, Chikara, Jersey All Pro, anything in that area. So when I first did shows where Lyle took pictures, I marked out so big for him. I told him, what an honor it was, all of that stuff. Even my first death match that people really saw was a smaller company called On Point Wrestling that Fremont helped book. It was Fremont and the guy named Loud. And I've done other deathmatch stuff with Dan D'Amato, which I'm beyond thankful for. But doing On Point in front of the crowds that go to see the W and buy the same DVDs I did, and when we were done, I got a please come back chant. I'm shocked I didn't cry in the ring right then and there. It's trying to look, but that meant the world to me too.
Yeah. Why are we so much the same? I cry so much over pro wrestling. I've cried so many times in the ring for things in wrestling, like my friends going to WWE or the whole CM Punk thing when that happened. It's wrestling is incredibly emotional for me. It does something for me that it doesn't do. Nothing else does for me. I can't explain it.
This weekend I seen Joe Gacy wrestle at MetLife Stadium and win the match. I lost my mind. I was tearing up. I was not yelling to Leslie, maybe, but I was audibly reacting and tearing up because Daisy is my dude. And the first time I wrestled him was in front of maybe 12 people paid. So seeing stuff like that is probably similar to what you're saying. Seeing your friends make it. Sorry that my friend won a SummerSlam over Gargano, but
it's all good. We were enjoying the same match though, man, because not only did I watch Johnny wrestle in front of nobody, but I lived with the guy for a while and I know some struggles that he went through that, they're his stories to tell and hopefully one day he tells them. But him and Joe both, they've overcome a lot to be in an atmosphere in a setting like that.
Right. And Joe was never, I think he would say this, he was never the it guy of indie wrestling. He was never, I don't know who to use as examples, but a Homicide or Teddy Hart, whatever else. He was always, but kind of on the low. And so seeing him do that is, I love it, man. That makes me so beyond happy.
Yeah, it's great when we can have our own personal successes, but to see our friends also be successful is great. I often cite, when people talk about my personal career highlights, I always lump in being live in the crowd at TakeOver New York to see Johnny win the NXT championship. And that moment of he came into the crowd and he's standing on the chair in front of me, holding up the belt. And I don't know. It was surreal. I can't explain it. And like, I've never been that happy for myself.
Right.
And so like, it's just like such a fulfilling thing to see your friends achieve the things that they've worked so hard for.
I think it says something about you and I both, where in wrestling there's so much like don't make real friends. You're not gonna talk to these people after you're done with this and that. But like the fact that you and I can both go, hey, like these guys and girls who mean a lot to us are absolutely killing it. I think it's healthy that we were able to find meaningful actual relationships in a niche business where you don't find that really.
Well, I think too, wrestling being like it's built on physicality and it's built on trust, right? And I think when we share these, not just moments outside of the ring, but these moments in the ring, like there's people like Jeff, obviously we've shared a lot of locker rooms over the years. We've had conversations and stuff, but we've never hung out outside of wrestling. But I feel like when I see you and like when we talk now, it's like, I just saw you yesterday or something. It's like we could pick up right where we left off, and I don't know, that's what I love about wrestling is the camaraderie.
Yeah, I feel like again, going back to what I said before, with not everybody let themselves be a fan. I feel like there's some people who don't let themselves fully get like immersed in the camaraderie, and guys who maybe take it themselves a little too seriously. Um, and I feel like they're just missing out on such a beautiful thing to wrestle, whether they make it to where they want or not. Like this part of the ride is so cool. I just hope people realize that.
The last match of record that you had was a four-way where you teamed with Puff with I can't remember who all was in it. Erica Lee, who all was in that match?
So it was me, Puff, who always tagged at LVAC as Club Soda. We were also tagging with Erica Lee and the Boar, who was a later Chikara guy, versus the Batiri, who I love those guys, and two younger guys, one named Ricky Price, and the other was Uni Underwood. Underwood, and they're great guys, but like I love the Batiri. I was so happy to do that with them. I'm sure you have a question, but I will say, like, I did not think going into it that it would be my last match. Um, I'll be honest, I thought the match kind of sucked. So it's a bummer, but I'm happy I got to do it with some guys and girl that I love being around.
Well, I was going to ask you how that match was, but like now that we know, just in general, like sometimes because like I don't know what my wrestling future looks like with my injury, right? Like the doctors are telling me probably shouldn't wrestle anymore because my tear wasn't just like a minor tear. Literally, I tore the whole pec tendon on my only good arm, right? And it still hurts very badly. The progress is very slow, right? I try to look at it as like, if I don't wrestle again, I try to hold on to the things that I've done, right? And the people that I met, the moments that I never thought I'd get to experience had it not been for wrestling. For you, you didn't have a choice whether that was your last match or not. Now that you're out of it, what do you try to hold on to?
There's so much. I mean, the camaraderie. I kind of don't have a way not to hold on to it because people have been, so kind, coming out of the woodwork and so supportive. And then I've been, going to shows just to stay busy, and it's as if I never left. Um, so I think that's been the big one. It's honestly made not trying to think how to word it. So like I'm not part of wrestling anymore physically, but the way everybody is so cool and open arms, it makes me feel like I'm still a good part of it. And it's helped me so much mentally going through all this that I think the camaraderie is number one. But also like as much as I didn't love that last match. My last year of wrestling was so good. I got to do MLW, which I never would have thought I would do anything on, it's smaller TV, but it's still more than I ever thought I would do. I got to wrestle Raven as far as I know, his last televised match. I got to work with a bunch of guys who I was a fan of, whether it was Jake Crist or Ricky Shane Baszler, as you know, has become a friend of mine. And even like there was a local promotion to me called UWA Elite. It's run by a couple guys, including Corvus Fear, who I mentioned earlier. And my last year there, I won a tag title. They do a thing every year where fans vote on awards. I won match of the year. You put all that together. I had like a low key, very very good last year, and I think that's something that I can kind of hang my hat on. Where I wish I had the last match I would want, but since I can't, I can hold on to, hey, your last year was fucking phenomenal.
Hell yeah. You've had such an outpouring of support from people. The GoFundMe has been doing tremendously. How the fuck did Mark Cuban see your GoFundMe?
So I don't know how much they want. I'm just going to tell the story. So, and cut me off if I go long. So one night, me and my wife, Sam, or Tara Calloway, as she wrestled as, I'm sitting here. The GoFundMe is new. She looks and she goes, holy shit, there's somebody donated $10,000. And it did not say Mark Cuban. It said a whole different name. And so we're trying to think, like, is that some wrestler who we know, who's got a little more famous? Is that their real name? Could not think of anything. She refreshes the page and it says Mark Cuban. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So she Googles the original name. It was like Renee something and Mark Cuban. And she was his, or is his, I think it was like chief financial officer. So we're like, all right, this is real. How did this happen? We could not figure it out. She texted a good friend of hers who wrestled by the name of Casey Catal, or later Casey Cook. We're still good friends with her and Brandon Kirk, her husband. And Casey is a diehard Dallas Mavericks fan, the team that Cuban owned, I guess. I don't know. And so Sam Texter goes, hey, I guess we're fans too. Um, so Casey writes back, holy shit, I can't believe it worked. And we're like, what does that mean? So I called Brandon. I go, what's going on? Casey had his, I guess Mark Cuban, I didn't know this, has like a very public email. So she had emailed him and just told him my whole story. And all of a sudden there's $10,000 in it in the GoFundMe. And it's funny because Casey goes, he didn't even reply. Like the way she found out is from Sam sent her the screenshot. And then like an hour later, Casey texts him, oh, he just replied that he donated this and he's so sorry to hear about it. And wild. So that was all the Kirk family who, I love them both very much. And that's still insane to me.
Yeah, you're loved in wrestling and beyond. And I think a good showing of that love is the show that Joey Janela is helping put on, the Cannonball Fest, which is happening next month. What is it, September 15th?
14th, I think. It's whatever the Sunday is.
Okay, yeah.
Unbelievable, because like I've known Joey since my day one. But we don't talk every day. It's, like you and I. Well, we don't talk every day, but when we do, it's right back to normal. And Joey's always been awesome. I love, and when so I didn't know about the show until the Hall of Fame, but then I find out him, Sam, Tony Deppen, who is my best friend in all of wrestling, my buddy Pat, who was my best friend for years before I was even wrestling, and my brother Nick, not involved in wrestling at all, have all been talking about this and conspiring. And putting it together, and they surprised me with it. And they still don't tell me anything. I find out when announcements go up. Even this morning, I woke up and Sam goes, "Hey, did you see what Santana's doing at your show?" I go, "No," and then I pull up Instagram, so everybody knows before I do. I'm the last to find out now. But it's wild. It's at New Providence High School in New Providence, New Jersey. It is the, I think, 3 square mile town that I grew up in. At the high school I went to, my brother still does a lot of stuff with the township, so he pulled some strings. He got the high school, and Joey, Tony, Sam are all, you know, pulling every favor they can for me and getting a wild lineup. Um, yeah, the outpouring from that alone has been unbelievable.
Yeah, it's really a who's who of professional wrestling right now, and it's all in support of you. And obviously, every cent is going to go to you. But if someone's listening to the show and they wanted to contribute, we're going to be posting the GoFundMe all week on social media. I'm going to be plugging it. You still have a store, right? Like a big cartel and everything. People can buy shirts and stuff.
So now everything has moved over. I should have looked this up before. I think it's merchbin.net.
Okay.
The guys who run LVAC Wrestling in Pennsylvania, they do screen printing, and they were nice enough to take the lead. I want to say it's merchbin.net. If I'm wrong, I'll text you the right thing after this.
Okay.
But and also, like, if you follow me on Instagram or Facebook, I'll post it all the time. One thing therapy has got me better at is I know when I got to ask for help now. And I said no to a lot of stuff, and I had to change my mind because prices do keep rising. So I've learned to shamelessly post the merch bin site, the GoFundMe, and help with everything. But yeah, I will be posting all my personal stuff. I'll send to you as well just to make sure. But yeah, and again, those shirts, LBAC is run by a dude named Bruce Rejects, and he's come out huge for me. Those shirts and have been awesome.
Before we end the show, is there anything that you want to say to the fans that have supported you over the years, come out, bought a ticket, watched you wrestle, watched you on streaming? Anything you want to say to them?
I mean, it's been hard for me to say everything, whether it was GCW or ICW, because as soon as I get a mic in my hands now, I start crying immediately. So I'm sorry for that. But I like to think that in between all my sobbing, I've made everybody realize how thankful, how grateful I am, whether you were a fan of me before I got sick, or you found out I got sick and or are just being nice now. I could not appreciate it more. There's no cure for what I got, but mentally, I've been doing way better than I have any right to be doing. And I think that is a big, big, big part to the wrestling community, whether it is the fans or the guys and girls and non-binary pals in wrestling. The way everybody involved has really kept my spirits up has been incredible. And I cannot thank everybody enough. Again, whether it's fans or workers or whatever. It's hard. I wish I could say more, but there's really no words for it all. It's been incredible, and I think a lot of that is because everybody keeps saying I am one of the nicer guys they've ever met through wrestling, and I hope everybody realizes. And I want to say this at the Hall of Fame, but I cried my way out of it. It's not. It's really not hard to be nice. So I would just like everybody to be nice to each other, because that's all everybody keeps saying about me, and it should not be a special thing to be a nice guy. That I appreciate it, but the fact that everybody just goes to, oh, he's so nice. Why isn't everybody being so nice? I just wish if people learn anything, it's just be cool to each other. As Danny Havoc always said, it's nice to be nice, and if anybody ever ends up in an unfortunate predicament like myself, being nice has kept me in people's good positive thoughts and prayers and whatever they do, and I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, it costs nothing to be nice, but also on top of you being an incredible person, uh, just an awesome wrestler, incredible deathmatch performer. And, I think most people forget, you really developed another layer to your character when you started doing, which I know wasn't intentional, these short soda reviews. And I think people got to see a little bit more of your comedic side. And I just want to tell you, Jeff, the two tag matches that we had, you and Puff versus me and Eddie, and then you and Greg Excellent versus me and Eddie. I hate watching myself wrestle, and I instantly know afterwards, like I'm picking apart everything that I do as a performer. I want you to know that I had none of those feelings after those matches, and I actually enjoy watching those matches back and showing people. And they rank near the top for me, and I want to thank you for those. And I just want to tell you that, like, I value you and your friendship so much, and I love you, man.
I love you. It's funny, you're gonna make me cry talking about comedy matches, but I feel the same way about both those matches, and it's beautiful that we could do that together.
Yeah. At Jeff Cannonball on Instagram, and like I said, we'll be linking everything up this week all over social media to help Jeff out as best we can. And Jeff, I can't thank you enough for your time, man.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I hope I didn't ramble too much, and I hope my weird slurring was still somewhat able to be understood.